plays in the political landscape.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam Eidinger. Last name is spelled E-I-D-I-N-G-E-R. And I'm the chairman of the DC Cannabis Campaign. So this is my 9th Seattle Hempfest. I've made this journey every summer. It seems like I skipped a couple of years, but basically it's my 9th one. And I have to say, every time I come to Seattle Hempfest, I bring back new ideas to the East Coast, because this really is a global event. It's a meeting place of cannabis enthusiasts from not just the state of Washington, but all over the world. And a lot of what I've learned over the years is that you just have to do it. You just have to go and organize at your local level to legalize marijuana to get things done. So about a year ago, when we were here, I really was percolating the idea that we were going to put legalization on the ballot in the nation's capital. And because of this inspirational event, because of legalization passing here, and really seeing the change come into place, we really gained the confidence to go back home, back east, and put it on the ballot there. So this summer, or late spring and summer, we collected 57,000 signatures, and we put the question of legalization of minimal amounts of marijuana for personal use on the DC ballot. And there are 650,000 people who live in the nation's capital. They don't live in any other state. They live in Washington, D.C. And they're going to get to vote, registered voters, this November to legalize. Polling shows that we have 63% support in this. And because of the interest of time, I'm just going to jump to it. Why is the support for legalization of marijuana so high in the shadow of the nation's capital? And the reason is because we are still a majority African-American city, and 8 out of 9 marijuana arrests are African-Americans. And if you look around the room here, I don't see any African-Americans, maybe a couple, sorry. But, you're definitely, there are more African-Americans in Washington, D.C. It's a per capita population than here in Seattle. And this is a popular issue. This is seen as a civil rights issue. This isn't seen as a personal freedom or as a business opportunity for a lot of people. This is seen primarily as, I know someone who went to jail for marijuana. Every year I know someone who goes to jail for marijuana. In fact, 1 out of 120 people in the city goes to jail for marijuana annually, okay? And most people know more than 120 people who live in the city. They have probably about 200 friends, by average, or 200 acquaintances. So you will know someone, ultimately, who goes to jail every year for marijuana, and people are sick of it. 5,000 plus arrests. It was the highest arrest rate for marijuana in the world. So now it's on the ballot, it's favored to pass. The opposition, where is the opposition? They're barely there, except in Congress. And this is, to conclude my remarks, I want to say that by putting legalization on the ballot here in Washington State, and inspiring other states to do it, it's going to be on the ballot in D.C., and then if it passes, Congress will have to review it, because our laws are reviewed by Congress for 60 days. And when that review takes place, we hope there'll be a great debate about legalization, finally, in Congress. And it won't just be a reactionary approach to it, where we're just going to overturn the will of the voters. Because that's how bad it's getting for the opponents, for the prohibitionists. That the only way that they can keep legalization from becoming a reality is to literally overturn an election. And they're already threatening it. Andy Harris, the congressman from Maryland, is already threatening it. It's a right-winger. So I hope people pay attention to what's happening in Washington, D.C. I'll be available for questions. And have a great Hempfest, everyone. Thank you for inspiring people on the East Coast.
Our next speaker is Dr. Michelle Sexton from the Center for the Study of Cannabis and Social Policy. She's here to help us understand some of the science a little bit better, as well as some of the differences between maybe recreational users and medical marijuana patients. And the new thing that people are talking about a lot is CBDs and how those work and some of the things we can know about that.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Michelle Sexton, and I'm here representing the Center for the Study of Cannabis and Social Policy. And my interest at the center is a lot around the social policy of how cannabis is dealt with as a medicine, in addition to other types of social policy. I'm a naturopathic doctor, so I've been working with quite a few patients who use cannabis. We have had a cannabis use survey what we express. And so selecting a plant for expression of a particular gene is profiling the plant, I believe. I work with a group of families here in Washington State who have children suffering, severely suffering from intractable epilepsy, autistic spectrum disorders, cancer, and they don't just use cannabidiol. Cannabidiol is what is being profiled as the Republican form of medical marijuana. And I disagree as a doctor based on what I've observed primarily in these children. It's a fallacy that CBD only is helping these children. I'm going to estimate that probably at least 80% of the parents are going back and getting a THC dominant concentrate and adding it to their medical mix. For these children to withdraw from the dangerous anti-epileptic drugs that they're on, THC provides them relief from the suffering of that withdrawal. So profiling a plant and saying that it can't have the diversity that nature intended is not going to serve anyone, particularly patients. And I think we need to keep this in mind here. As we're here in Washington and this plant is being set free, we might take it for granted, the access that's available here, because right now patients can access any variety that they want. That could change for patients here. And as laws are being set up in other states, the plant is being profiled to not allow for THC in the plant. And the compounds work together. This is how plant medicine and herbs are really different from pharmaceutical medicines. They're not single agents. And the particular ratios of cannabinoids that even an individual patient might want at different times can vary. Different cancers might want different cannabinoid ratios, for instance, to actually try to treat different cancers. So this is, of course, research that needs to be done. And so this plant needs to be descheduled. It doesn't need to be rescheduled. It is a botanical medicine, and we need to be able to freely access it like other plants. So I hope that we can all keep working with all the other states and internationally to set this plant free. Prohibition is over, and to restrict it medically makes absolutely no sense at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Our next speaker is one of the best champions for military veterans that we could hope to have. Michael Krawitz runs Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, and he's here to explain what's stopping veterans from getting access to cannabis and what we can do to change it.
Thanks, Karen. Yes, Michael Krawitz, Executive Director of Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. I'm also on the board of the International Alliance for Cannabis as Medicine out of Germany, and I'm an advisor to Patients at a Time. I say that just so you know, I've put in a lot of years in the trenches working on cannabis policy and cannabis activism, and been part of a lot of important and successful, and maybe some not so important and not so successful enterprises in the past under this banner. So I just want to, I'm proud of that. I'm very proud to be here at Hempfest, and thank you all for coming, and your attendance is really important. I think the thing you need to really understand, is kind of a lockbox that they've created on a policy at the federal level. And I've come up here, there's an article back there from the New York Times talking about the blockade to research. So the federal government has been saying for a long, long time, you can't have cannabis as a medicine because it's unproven. And then when you try to prove that it's a medicine, you can't have the cannabis to do the study because it's illegal. And it's been a perfect catch-22. It's worked very, very well for decades. And we have a study that we've actually, believe it or not, we've got some activists that are actually ardent enough to see through that process and actually get the access to the cannabis, even though the federal government has created this lockbox. Rick Doblin with MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Study, good organization with, I guess, the assistance of psychedelics, is able to enter an unopenable box. And after 20-something years, did get approval to get the cannabis to do the study, but yet having the access to the cannabis for the study has found itself to be only one part of the puzzle. We found ourselves up against individuals at the state legislature who were determined to keep us from being able to study it, people that were part of like communities, anti-drug coalitions of America, and trying to exert their muscle in the legislature to keep us from being able to pass bills to get this study going. And then most recently, a couple of, I guess, people inside the university that feel that they're more drug warrior than researcher or academic, they're actually taking action directly against our researcher, Dr. Sue Sisley, who's got an impeccable record, a remarkable physician, attacking her personally and removing her from her post to try to keep us from doing this study. The study is a triple-blind, placebo-based study testing cannabis on treatment-resistant cases of post-traumatic stress, veterans that need cannabis for post-traumatic stress. And while I'm thinking of it, I just find it remarkable that I'm following these two stories here. There need not even be the story I'm talking about. When you're talking about D.C., this whole conversation is going to come to a head, I think, over the D.C. initiative. That's where this whole conversation about this lockbox is finally going to actually be held. And talking about CBD, and talking about the role that cannabinoids, now that we've unlocked that, scientific lockbox, that's going to be the news. Eons from now, they're going to look back at this time, and one of the coolest things about this time is the discovery of some of these medical applications. So I'm really, really proud to be part of this. I just want to mention that we're working at the international level. Our country, the United States, has signed into treaties, which is good and bad sometimes. We like the treaties, sometimes we don't. And the drug control treaties, we really don't. And they've really prevented us from being able to have good access to cannabis all around the world. And we're working on the treaty at the international level, but it's good at the local level to keep in mind that what you're doing here is important to countries all over the world. It's a guiding light for them. And they're looking at this as maybe a model on how we go past our commitments to hold on to these prohibition dogma that are written into U.S. federal law and then mirrored with the treaty back and forth. And I can answer questions if you're interested in more of those details. But thanks again.
And we will follow up these remarks with a brief question and answer period for anybody who asks questions. So Hempfest has also been really lucky to have some of our leading champions for change come here and speak to us about what we can do to get more involved in the process. This year we have Congressman Dana Rohrabacher from California who's coming to speak to us about change on the federal level. We have former Governor Gary Johnson from New Mexico, one-time presidential candidate. And we're really lucky to have State Senator Jinko Wells, who has been somebody who has fought consistently for medical patient rights for over a decade now for us. So I want to go ahead and have her talk about the medical marijuana process and how patients can get more involved in that.
Thank you very much, Carrie. It's just delightful to be here, especially because I just have to walk across the street from my apartment, so it's very convenient. And I actually walk through here just about every day, early in the morning, and I took some photos yesterday while preparations were still going on and posted those on my Facebook page and got a lot of good responses for people who are coming. I will be speaking tomorrow at the Hemposium here on a panel about medical marijuana in Washington State. Can we save it? Of course, in that panel, we'll be discussing what's going on and what needs to be done. But I am very optimistic that we will save medical marijuana in our state. Because we have to. Medical marijuana is different from recreational marijuana in terms of usage, and sometimes people take both. But there are distinct differences, and we have to do all we can to make sure that those legitimate patients who really get relief and get help for their medical conditions, sometimes very debilitating, sometimes terminal conditions, should be able to get the supply they need, make sure that there's the quality, that there is not pesticides being used, there's adequate testing, and that they can get it for a very affordable price and be able to grow it on their own or by a provider. So, actually, I got involved with this issue in 1995, my first year in the Senate, and I can't believe it's almost 20 years has gone by. But we've made a lot of changes. It's been a very tough, challenging policy area because there's such a wide range of beliefs about this natural plant and whether it is an evil demon weed or if it's a medicine, whether it should be regulated, whether it should not be. And I can just guarantee you this, at least I will be working on the interest of patients as well as public safety when we meet in legislative session next January. I know I'll be working with Carrie Boyder and many others who are here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Wells. We also have here today Douglas Hyatt. He's one of our leading defense attorneys here in Washington. He has helped protect us in court for a long, long time, and he will probably be doing that for quite a while longer, as long as we still have federal prohibition in place.
It's nice to see everyone here at Hempfest again. I can't believe that this is year 23, but it really is year 23. When I first got involved in reform and medical marijuana issues, I thought, we'll have this straightened out in no time at all. Science is clear, compassion is there, the will is there. I thought, what could be the problem? And here we are 23 years later with the same problem. And the problem remains the same, in spite of the fact that we have had some success with reform and voters have expressed their will. The problem remains the same. We have not changed the goddamn law. Okay? That is the problem. That is the solution to every problem that everyone here is talking about. It is the solution to the veterans problem. It's the solution to the doctor's problem. It's the solution to the politician's problem. It's the solution. That is what we have to do. In this state, and I'm incredibly happy to have Senator Caldwell's fighting for us in the legislature. I love her. She's a great lady. And I am optimistic that we can save medical marijuana, and I hope that we do, because the pernicious notion that medical marijuana patients can be taken care of at non-existent 502 stores has got to be killed. The idea that patients and sick people are going to be taken care of by a non-functioning, ill-conceived recreational system that I believe will soon be declared illegal is not going to protect patients. The legislators need to know that 502 is, in my opinion, most likely going to fail. And because of that, we need to protect medical patients. It is imperative that we not buy into this idea that everything's solved by 502, because it's just not going to work. So with that said, the overarching problem remains we have to change the federal law. We cannot make this work constitutionally, legally, until we change the federal law. And because we have a Congress that is way worse than the do-nothing Congress, which passed 900 bills, we have a Congress that's on track to pass about 200. So what are they, the ultimate do-nothing Congress? I don't know. You couldn't get the 10 Commandments through Congress if Moses was buying drinks. The problem is deep, and we have got to get on it. And we have got to get on it hard. We've got to rededicate ourselves. We've got to forget about celebrating. That's over. That was 2 years ago. It's time to change the law. We've got to do it now. We've got to get it together. We've got to get in the streets again. We've got to end this goddamn drug war, and we've got to change the federal law to do it.
Right.
Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to be on a couple panels this weekend. I'm around. I'm happy to talk with anyone on these issues. some of the bad news, but that's just the way it is. I hope everybody has a really good Hempfest. I hope everybody's safe, and thank you so much for coming.
You know, what's unique about this phase that we're in now is that for a long time, we were all able to talk about legalization, this idea of legal marijuana. And we all knew that's what we wanted because we didn't have legalization yet. And now we get to talk about what that looks like and some of the differences. And that means that a lot of different people have different opinions. And the problem with the policies is that caught in the middle are the individuals who try to follow these policies. And when the policies aren't clear, you end up having people who sometimes go to prison because of it. Right here in Washington, we have a family from Eastern Washington. They're known as the Kettle Falls Five. You may have heard about them in the national media. They've been covered by Time Magazine and Al Jazeera, USA Today. They're going to be on a piece in CNN next week. And what happened with them is that they were medical marijuana patients who were growing for themselves. They were not providing it to anybody else. They were not selling it. They were just growing for themselves, 44 plants. And the state came in and they checked everything out and realized that they were in compliance with the law and chose not to prosecute. But a week later, the DEA came back and they served a federal warrant. And the problem is, as Doug explained, is it's all illegal under federal law. And so right now that family is facing a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in prison apiece for following a law that's been in place for over 15 years. And that's the problem with the federal policy. As long as we have that policy unchanged, individuals are going to get caught up in the crossfire between. We've heard President Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder say that they are not prosecuting individual patients. And we've seen 3 different memos from the Department of Justice backing that up. But the reality is, on the street, U.S. attorneys are using their discretion to continue to go after people. And it's really up to each individual U.S. attorney. That's why here in Washington, where we have 2 different federal districts, we see such a disconnect between Eastern Washington and Western Washington. Western Washington has U.S. Attorney Jenny Durkin, and Eastern Washington has U.S. Attorney Michael Ormsby. And over in Eastern Washington, they are hell-bent on pursuing patients and recreational participants for as little as 1 plant. That's what I've heard them say in court. So that means we have to change the federal law. And that means Congress has to act to do it. We can't settle on policy changes anymore because it's not good enough. And Congress is now realizing it. They've actually had 3 different bills that they've made some pretty big movement on this year. One of them was a proposal to defund the Department of Justice interference in state medical marijuana programs. So that passed on the floor of the U.S. House. Congress, where hardly anything gets done. The first historic reform to marijuana passed with a vote of 219 to 189. And all of a sudden, that started a firestorm of change coming on. Our representative from here in Washington, Denny Heck, my representative from the Tacoma area, he sponsored an act exactly the same, only they replaced the Department of Justice with the Department of Treasury. And now banks can no longer be pursued if this passes the law. That passed with an even more sweeping margin of 231 to 192. Both huge step forwards, but they're budget issues. They only last for a year. That means after this year, even if they pass through the Senate and they're put on the president's desk and he signs them into law, they have to be repassed next year. So there's bigger bills like H.R. 689, the States' Rights Act, that would actually move marijuana out of the Controlled Substances Act Schedule 1 and into a more appropriate level. And more importantly, it would move our research out of the hands of NIDA, the Institutes for Drug Abuse, which Michael explained some of the problems with having them do our research. We could finally get some of the information that we need. We know that marijuana works, but we have none of the research. That would be a huge step to move us forward. So in short, until we change the federal law, we really can do all this experimenting on the state level and people are going to be caught up in it. So we need to make sure that we're not just celebrating moving forward, but that we continue to work for reform. Contact your congresspeople. Contact your state lawmakers and make sure that they know as we're moving forward in the regulatory phase what you need, what your needs are as a marijuana consumer. Don't be left out of these discussions. There's a lot of discussions to be had and we need to continue moving this ball forward. With that, I'm going to go ahead and start the question and answer period. We have some great panelists. Is there anybody with any questions? Sir.
Yes, I'd like to address our friend from DC. Hello, my name is Jay Statzer, and part of the reason I'm here at Hempfest this year is to promote the DC Smoke-In. It's going to be the 45th anniversary event next year, and we talked about this change. He's talking about the new ballot initiative in DC. Unfortunately, again with DC, Congress seems to think they have a veto power over the will of the people. They can even prevent the vote from being counted so that no one would know that it passed or not. So we've got some serious problems there, but what I want to do is, first of all, invite you to come and participate fully in the event next year, because we're going to need you there. And second of all, Obama did say he was going to lay off the patients, and in Michigan, where I'm also from, he has done that. He's laid off the patients, but he hasn't laid off the caregivers. And so a friend of mine named Otto was arrested by a detective in Michigan who went to his house, tried to get him to sell him cannabis, and he said, no, I'm very conscientious about the fact that I only provide the patient. So this detective went and got a card from the state of Michigan in order to pose as a patient, and that is not allowed to be brought up in court. And so we have entrapment going on still, and this is what I said, when we legalize just for medical, we're putting the patients on the front line. So what I want to know is there a strategy to deal with, you said we need more people on the street, getting in the street, but I think that's mostly the thing that we can do is get out in the street, because that's the last thing the people in power want us to do. So give us some more advice about getting it more active that way.
Okay. All right, this is on. There's a group in Washington, D.C. called DC Vote. They actually get a budget from the D.C. government to work on getting equal rights for D.C. residents. We've already had a constituent day at Congressman Andy Harris's office, the congressman who introduced a rider that would limit our recently enacted decriminalization of marijuana law. It's now a $25 ticket to be caught with less than an ounce of marijuana in D.C., and that should reduce a significant number of the arrests. Well, you have members of Congress, right-wing Republicans like Harris, threatening to overturn it, and they did pass a rider. So what way it stands now is that the Senate, being led by Democrats, has said that they are not going to approve these riders. The Senate version of the D.C. appropriations bill does not have any riders in it, as well as for other issues like gun control and abortion, which the Republicans have passed in the House. And finally, President Obama, not him personally, but his valet Jarrett, made a statement not long after all this became public that he would veto any bill that tried to overturn DC's local laws that were enacted. So I think we've got some national folks watching our backs, and really this might help raise the issue that's long overdue, that DC residents should have equal rights like the rest of Americans. And so a lot of people kind of like this fight. They relish the fight and think that we can win it.
Any other questions?
How do you spell Sexton?
Sexton.
Hi, thanks for coming. I'm with a community radio station down in Oregon, and we have it on the ballot again. I think education is really important, and voter registration. You know, other countries, when you're born, you can get right to vote. Australia, they pay you to vote. So I think that if we can find some way to really make it not so much easier, but more accessible. If you would go back in history to voters' rights, every time that came up from the rich white landowner in Pennsylvania to today, it's one of the biggest battles.
Do we have any other questions? I emphasize questions. Ben?
Thank you so much, panelists, for this opportunity to ask a question. And thank you, Adam, for your work in Washington, D.C., where I live. That is really some groundbreaking work you're doing there. And for states' rights, it's for the statehood movement. It's really, really important. My name is Ben Droz, and I was wondering what about, I heard that the Congress recently passed some language in the Farm Bill. I think it says Section 7606. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about that and what the...
It's not the law yet, right?
I actually read that did become law.
That did become law.
Yeah.
So I guess under the Farm Bill, states can research industrial hemp now in the United States for the first time. And thanks to the good work of a group called Vote Hemp that Ben works for. And Ben should probably be up here on the panel. Anyway, Ben is the main lobbyist for Vote Hemp. And yeah, it is law now. Yes, it is law.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and then we're going to wrap up. We have another panel coming up, so I'll let you two duke it out over who's going to get the last question.
I'm going to ask Senator. Well, yeah, I want to ask. Oh, actually, my question is for Senator Colwell. So before you speak out, and we've met. I'm Sean Danae, Washington Bud Company, and so my question is for those of us that are doing business in a commercial manner. I grow medical marijuana, and I provide it only to medical marijuana stores that provide it only to medical marijuana patients. And so for businesses such as mine and businesses such as the medical marijuana stores that are already doing business, that are already paying their taxes, that are already licensed in whatever manner that we can become licensed, what is your current thinking on how to maintain that or allow us to continue to provide medicine for patients in the future in this 502 world? What's your thoughts on that?
Thanks for the question. Many of you know I've worked on this for a long time, and in fact, one of the most heart-wrenching, disappointing failures that has happened to me throughout my legislative career was when then Governor Gregoire partially vetoed my legislation 3 years ago that would have regulated licensed growers, producers, processors, and retailers. We would not be in all the challenges, difficulties we have now that have not happened. And we were left with a mess in our statutes because of the sectional vetoes, not line item vetoes, and nothing fits. But saying that, we absolutely have to provide security, safety, well-being for patients, but also for the business, the proprietors, who are doing a great job. And so I think, personally, that we need to have some system of regulation and licensing for our providers, for our producers, processors, and retailers. It's really challenging. I supported I-502, I still do, but we know there are a lot of challenges because initiatives are never perfect. They don't go through the legislative deliberation. Next year, there will be 2 years that have passed, so we can amend Initiative 502 by a simple majority. Before that, it would have taken 2/3 majority. So it's the will of the legislature, it's not the will of one legislator. If I were Philosopher King, I could do a whole lot of things. But what is paramount is that individuals like you speak out, meet with legislators. In Seattle, licenses are granted and they're extending that period. But that's business license. So right now we're in a gray world. We don't have laws prohibiting dispensaries or stores for medical marijuana. We don't have anything allowing, authorizing. So my pledge is to work as hard as I can to make sure that you survive and patients with the help of the patients indirectly who get the product later on.
Thank you.
Bring that back, but it's only going to start with these wild seeds. It's going to take much development, real breeding efforts by agronomists and all that before we have the super crop that hemp promises us.
I just want to pipe up that nearly half the states have some sort of medical marijuana law, hemp law, CBD law, or legalization law in the books right now, or decrim law. And it's at a tipping point for the United States. I believe the federal government will take advantage of the Washington, D.C. ballot initiative passing as an opportunity for Congress to debate legalization. And a lot of people are waiting for 2016 for California to do an initiative, for other states. I think the federal government and the president are likely to legalize marijuana, at least the federal level, before 2016. Like, I think we're really in the final, 12 months before a viable bill is presented and passed. And I've been coming here for years, and that's a pretty big...
I'm holding you to that.
You can hold me to it. We'll see where a year from now. But, and that's going to be a game changer, because right now, unfortunately, 1% of electricity generation in the United States goes into indoor cultivation for marijuana. And it's just, you know what that does? It raises the price of electricity for other industry, when all we need is the sun and maybe a little bit of light in certain climates. All right, a little bit of added light in a greenhouse. But we need to be using the sun to grow cannabis. And as soon as we allow interstate commerce of cannabis, game over for this whole business model of urban cultivation. Okay? And I think it's a good thing, because I believe the price of cannabis is artificially high because of urban cultivation. In DC right now, all the cannabis sold in dispensaries is grown in huge warehouses. They'll be indoor, they'll always be indoor, but it's not going to be the majority of cannabis when it becomes legal. And we need native people to be able to grow cannabis and be able to sell it to anybody in the country. And you need to allow growers in this part of the country who are expert growers to be able to sell their wares everywhere in America. Okay? That's how it is for alcohol. We keep talking about treat it like alcohol. We have to look at interstate. And this is a radical vision I have. I know it is, because it's like anti-business the way things are right now. A lot of people who are making money off of the dispensary model would be like, whoa, we're going to be growing outdoors now? And a lot of politicians, what? We're growing outdoors? But it goes back to tomatoes, all right? We need a similar policy, and it's crazy. We wouldn't say you can only grow tomatoes in this city and sell them in this city, okay? We don't do that. But that's what we're doing in Washington, D.C. for marijuana. That's what we're doing in other parts of the country for marijuana. I say marijuana, by the way, on the East Coast, you say cannabis, and literally 60% of people do not know what you're talking about. I apologize to people who say the word marijuana in some ways, because I know out here people don't say marijuana, they say cannabis. But we have to think big, and the big is federal legalization means no scheduling. It's legal in all 50 states. If a state wants to outlaw it, that would be okay, but that would be local. And you have that right now in Missouri. You've got dry counties still trying to become wet counties all these years later after end of alcohol prohibition. So we're always going to have that. Like some places that just really don't want it, they're going to have that right. That's what local democracy is all about. But if you have communities like Northern California and here in the Northwest that are expert growers, they should be able to use UPS and ship it out east. And we're not going to get, there's a business model there right now, and it's being held back by prohibition. I don't see a lot of applause for my statement. Think about it, though.
We got time for one more question. Well, we got one more.
As for the scheduling that you spoke about, do you know where we're at in the process with marijuana not being on Schedule 1? Do you know if there's any organizations out there fighting this or trying to?
Yes, my whole adulthood we've been fighting this.
Yeah, there's still a fight going on with that. And I know people that are going into that for the fight.
All right, I'd like to answer that.
Go ahead, Michael, because you come the closest here.
Well, what Donnie's talking about is that we've got a case going all the way back to the 1970s, started by Normal and Bob Randall to reschedule cannabis. That case was stuck for like 10, 12 years on standing. We were having trouble as a movement showing that we were being harmed by marijuana prohibition. That's trippy, but that's where we're at. And I used a veteran's argument that essentially a veteran having to leave the VA hospital, that the Veterans Affairs doctor not allowed to talk about it, that prohibition on free speech causing the veteran to have to leave the hospital and duplicate medical files, it gave us that standing. That was agreed to. We did get standing, and then that only got us, a little further down the road, where then we are basically stuck against the DEA, who, on one hand, has all the information that they've used to classify the active ingredient in marijuana, Marinol, Schedule III drug. They not only created this drug and have all the information that allowed it to be created, showing medical value of essentially cannabis, the active ingredient, but that it was so safe that they could reschedule it and make it Schedule III. And on the other hand, we're in federal court and they're saying, well, there's not even a stitch of evidence anywhere that says marijuana has medical value. And they've been getting away with this for a long time. We've got a lot of irons in the fire at the federal government, bills that are before Congress that will reschedule cannabis in various ways. I encourage you to look into those. Talk to your congressman, your senator about supporting those. But I want to go even a little bit further, the bigger picture here. We've been part of this drug war now for about 100 years, starting with opium wars. I'll send you back to Google to learn about that. That's like in the 1890s. And essentially the part I want you to take away from this is that in between then and now, we went from a time period where all the plants were basically listed. You had access to them, you used them as a medicine, we knew how the plants were used, this one you use the root, this one you use the berries, whatever, and cannabis was in there. It always had been in there. And now we're trying to put it back in there, back into the pharmacopoeia. That's one half of it. But the other half, and maybe more important, and that is the colonialism and stuff that she was talking about, that existed throughout the whole world, not just pointed at the Indians in the United States, but in other nations around the world, India, the country. Right now we've got an effort by South American countries, Uruguay, Costa Rica, Ecuador, etc., all working on trying to go to the United Nations and pressure the United States and Russia and China and others that are holding this prohibition line to change the policy finally on marijuana. If that's successful, that's going to be, forcing the federal government from both sides. You've got the forcing them from the state level here in Washington, Colorado, elsewhere with our state initiatives. This is a thing outside forcing back. And it's going to take pressure from both sides if we're going to finally get the cannabis back where it belongs, to get it descheduled, but also to get it reasonably accessible for medical access again.
All right, we got 2 minutes. Everybody's got 30 seconds to wrap it up. Give us your website, how to get more information about you. Go ahead, Melissa.
Melissa Heisem, Cannabis Freedom March. Just Google my name or Google Cannabis Freedom March, Seattle's Cannabis Freedom March on Facebook. And I'm getting a website made, all volunteers. So if you guys want to come and help, let me know. And inspire each other.
Adam, I'm with the DC Cannabis Campaign, and based in Washington, D.C. Our website is dcmj.org. We have some literature about the campaign at the Dr. Bronner booth right across the way there, so please come on by. And I just want to say, yes, every person can make a difference, but we also all have to work as a team and work together and listen to each other. So I'm all ears. I'd love to hear what you have to say about legalization after this panel is over. Just come and find me at the Dr. Bronner booth. Thanks.
Michael Krawitz, I'm Executive Director of Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. The easiest place to reach us at this point is through Facebook. Go to facebook/usa.vmca, as in Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, VMCA. And I would say that one of the biggest ways that you as individuals can help affect that big picture I was talking about is the United States is still going around the world talking from the Controlled Substances Act. They're still talking from the playbook that's written by the National Clearinghouse House of Drugs that says just ridiculously stupid things about cannabis that were thrown out, of the DARE class years ago. They're still saying that to these other world leaders as representing the United States. So when you as an individual citizen write a letter, do something that's published in a newspaper, whatever, you speak as a citizen, saying something to the contrary, saying something truthful about cannabis, or saying something about how the policy works, where they're derailing against it at these meetings. That's very helpful. That helps these other countries that are trying to make a stand say, well, yeah, sure, the United States is saying these things, but look at what the citizens are saying, and it helps to balance that. So as an individual, you have almost as much weight in your words as the federal government of the U.S. And I just want to really emphasize your power there. Thanks.
Just want to add to that, overgrow the world and make sure we get the information out there. If we get enough good information out there, people won't even be able to see the bad information. So just overflow with good stuff so we don't have room for bad stuff.
Hey, I want to thank this panel a lot. Thank the audience for paying attention. We're going to go on to our next panel. Everybody stay seated because this next panel is really